Hi, everyone. Welcome. See some people coming in, so thanks for coming today. We're just going to wait a few minutes to give time for more people to join, but please do feel free to introduce yourself in the chat while we do that. A lot more people rolling in, so welcome all. Thanks for joining us today. Just be waiting another couple minutes when more people join. But yeah, as mentioned in the chat, please do add your name and organization in the chat. It's also where we'll be taking some questions from the audience, so feel free to write those in there too. So see more people are coming in, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. Saying this a few times until we start, but yeah, just we're giving another couple minutes to get more people in, and yeah, please do write your name, your organization in the chat, role if you like as well, and if you have questions, the chat is where you're going to want to put them in throughout the webinar. So we'll be saving some time at the end for those. Some people are still coming in, so maybe another 30 seconds or so before I can kick things off. But yeah, welcome to the new attendees that are joining in. Start momentarily, but just yeah, for one last time for the group that's just joined, please do add your name and organization in the chat. Please add any questions in there as well, both now or throughout, and we'll kick things off in just a few seconds. Okay, well, hello everyone. Thank you very much for coming today to our webinar, to the ODI webinar, Next Generation Data Sharing in the Energy Sector. We are delighted to be not just organizing this ourselves, but kind of co-organizing with our colleagues over at DNV. Really looking forward to a lively discussion today. We have a great group here with our expert panel, and we're going to get to that. But before we do so, want to do a little intro from myself, from the ODI, as well as a little intro from DNV, and then we'll introduce the expert panel, have about half an hour of discussion or so. And then if there are questions for coming in from the audience, we'll kind of do a bit of an audience Q&A. If there are no questions, which I hope is not the case, we'll just keep talking. But either way, hopefully it'll be a useful discussion. So before we kind of start that presentation, just want to say hi to everyone. I'm Josh Daddario. I'm the head of consulting at the Open Data Institute, and I've been leading on a lot of our work in the energy sector over the last little while, so a number of years now. And I'll talk a little bit about that to set the scene a bit for the kind of discussions that we want to have today. Great. So maybe I'll start with the presentation if I can get the first slide up. Great. So what we're going to be talking about today, as the name might imply, is kind of next generation data sharing in the energy sector. So when we talk about this, we mean a number of different things, but the focus when it comes to the ODI and a lot of our partners has been around open data and shared data. So open data, data that anyone can access, use, and share that's on the web with an open license, as well as shared data. So data that is being shared between organizations or from a person to an organization, uh, very explicitly for a kind of explicit purpose. This is the types of sharing that we're going to mostly focus on and what we see as most impactful in our work today. So I'll go to the next slide, please. So for the ODI, obviously our name is the Open Data Institute. So open data and energy is a big part of the work that we do. We've been really thrilled to see the energy sector come a long way with this. UK Energy Networks, a few of which are represented here today, have been leading this with Ofgem's data best practices and committed to a kind of presumed open approach to open data and data sharing. So practically, this means that there's been a real culture shift from thinking about data being should start off as closed, but actually it should thinking that it should be published openly, unless it is kind of needs to be closed for kind of security reasons, privacy reasons, other harms. But the idea is let's think about it being open first. So we've been working with the sector on this and helping to align publishing practices around standardized open data licenses. So now we see the energy networks are publishing everything under Creative Commons, under the Open Government license. And this is really enhancing some data accessibility and supporting the sector's transition to net zero. So it's a great thing to see. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about shared data. So included in this presumed open approach is that data that can't be made openly, it should be considered to how it could be shared. So for secure data sharing to happen, the practices around this are a bit less standardized than simple licenses for data publishing. In data publishing, you can have a CC BY license and open government license, and you're done. With data sharing, it's a lot more complex. So we worked with the Energy Networks Association and the kind of members of the DDSG, the different networks, to create a first of its kind shared data license. So this is, again, really driving more data sharing than we've ever seen in the energy sector before, and doing so in ways that's really beneficial to data users and those accessing data. On my last slide is another kind of trend we're seeing in the energy sector that's really growing. So this is around smart data. If you're a data policy wonk, you've definitely heard of this term with the government smart data strategy that came out last year. As well, if you are aware of open banking, that's been a smart data scheme that's been existing in the banking sector for a number of years now. But smart data is now coming into the energy sector. What it means is just the secure sharing of customer data upon customer request with authorized third-party providers. There's already initiatives connected to this underway. So thinking about Perseus by Icebreaker One or the data sharing infrastructure stewarded by NESO. We helped run a Smart Data Challenge Prize last year with Nesta Challenge Works, and we saw some really clear evidence of different kind of prototype services, use cases coming online from low carbon energy providers to protecting vulnerable households and dropping bills. So we see this as a huge space. So yeah, that's what we just kind of want to start off with, setting a bit of a scene around thinking about open data, about data sharing, and about smart data as different ways that the ODI is seeing that kind of next generation data sharing in the energy sector. I'll now pass on to my colleague Dave at DNV, who will introduce himself, and then we'll get to introducing the panel. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, hi everybody. I am Dave Simpson. I'm just going to do a real quick scene set from the DMV standpoint, and I guess a little intro to me and my particular interest in this topic. I lead the UK data consulting team at DMV, where I guess simply put, we help organizations across the energy sector to make the most out of their data. So it's been a brilliant event to co-organize with Josh and the ODI team today. For people who don't know, DMV is a global risk management and assurance company. We are actually wholly owned by a Norwegian foundation, which, amongst lots of great things, means we get to do brilliant things like publish the Energy Transition Outlook, The ETO is a global and regional forecast of the energy mix, supply and demand. Actually goes out to 2060 now, and that's based on DNV's independent model of the world's energy system. So this is kind of the intro slide to the ETO, and I guess this is interesting for us to give a best estimate of what do we think the future energy system will look like, what will that mix look like, and therefore what is our route to decarbonisation, and how do we track against goals. The next slide shows one of those goals. So the UKTO addresses our key national targets, the first of which being Clean Power 2030. I'm sure we're all familiar with this target, but at a high level, that target is to approximately double onshore wind capacity and then treble solar and offshore wind, leaving us with less than 5% of unabated gas-fired electricity generation. That's the target. The ETO forecast is that we're going to make huge progress and huge growth, but that we're going to fall short of that target. But the next slide then goes into a little bit of detail of what does that mean in that transition. I'm a data visualization nerd. I'll just confess that now. So there's a lot of great charts in the ETO, and do look it up. It's free to download. So do find it online and download it. As I said, the UK one was refreshed this year, so it's quite recent. There's loads that we can say about this chart that you're seeing here, but the key really is to link into what we're talking about today is, as we all know, as the transition progresses, this energy system is getting more and more variable. So that variability is really increasing. We're going from a position where demand was really driving variability back in 2020 and previously, and we're moving towards this system where variable renewables are really increasing that variability. And then in tandem with that, we're seeing the flexibility that we need in order to balance that variability. And the key message for us is the complexity of the system is really increasing. And that means that the way that we share and manage and interact with data in the system is really critical to the way that we operate, the way that we manage, the way that we balance, and just the way that we cope with this change in the energy system and the transition that's being pushed forward. If we go to the next slide, I mentioned DNV is a risk management and assurance company, but a more succinct way to put that is that we're interested in trust. So trust is critical for the operation of the energy system, always has been. But what we're seeing now as we cope with increased data volumes and advanced technologies and digitalization is that really trust in those digital systems is becoming as critical as trust in that physical infrastructure. And that trust allows us to manage risk, and it also allows us to maximize that opportunity and shepherd a transition to a clean energy future. Really hot off the press, last month we published this position paper, which is really looking at how do we build trust in this digital energy system, and sort of centered around the AI conversation, the AI narrative, and the emergence of AI techniques to manage this future system. How do we go about establishing trust? So this is the DNV position on that, and particularly focused on garnering trust in this future digital energy system. And finally, my final slide, I just wanted to bring in an example, I guess, to feed us into the panel discussion, which I'm keen to get out of the way for. There are so many great examples of data sharing, proactive and impactful data sharing, as Josh has outlined across the sector, and we'll hear a lot about those in the panel discussion. But I want to just share one example, which is in quite a different area to what we'll hear from the panel. And a nice example because everything's the public domain, so you can follow the link that I've put in this slide and have a look for yourself and read the reports and look at the data set. But this is the London Register of Subsurface CO2 Storage. Essentially, this is the gathering and publication of carbon storage data in subsurface storage locations across the world. So this is meant to gather that data set to be a holistic and high quality data set to inform then strategy and policy alignment and research investment, and give an accurate picture of what that global situation looks like in terms of carbon capture and storage. This is run by a team at Imperial College London and supported by a global consortium and funded by the Royal Academy of Engineering. DNV are not involved in this project team. We're not involved in the gathering of publication data, but we were recently asked to provide independent assurance into the register's data quality. And this really focused around working with the team to prioritize or identify those key priorities of what high impact data would look like in this domain. So prioritizing those characteristics then meant we could assess them and provide recommendations for enhancement. I always think no webinar is complete without an ISO quote. So I've pulled a nice short one for us here, but this idea of data quality characteristics being prioritized. So there'll be a varying importance and priorities to different stakeholders. Therefore, there's a trade-off to be made. And really, I guess, key message from me is hitting those key requirements and prioritization in order to maximize the value and impact. That's really what I'm passionate about. And of course, that's what we want across the industry, right? We want to make data valuable and impactful. Um, you can accuse me of being biased, but I think this topic is fascinating and absolutely critical. So I'm delighted we're all here today to talk about it. But thanks a lot. I'll hand back to you, Josh.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you for really kicking us off with an ISO quote. As you said, nothing starts a webinar just quite like it. We'll do some quick introductions to our esteemed panel members. So I'll just shout you out and please let the people know who you are. Rachel, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure thing. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Rachel Hassel. I am a colleague of Dave's at DNV. I lead the data science and AI team in UK for energy systems. And my job is to create tangible value from data for our customers using data. So often involves trying to solve really tricky problems with emerging technologies and techniques.
Thank you, Rachel. John, can I come over to you next?
Hi everyone, I'm John Thompson. I'm a co-founder and chief product officer at a software startup called Yotta, and we're trying to build software solution that helps people run their own grid connection assessments.
Thanks, John. And Yusing, can you introduce yourself, please?
Good afternoon, Yusing Pang, data sharing manager at UK Power Networks. We own and operate about a quarter of the country's electricity infrastructure on a distribution network, serving 21 million people or 8.3 million customers. So we look after London, the southeast, and the east of England.
Thanks, Yusing. Abbas, can I come to you?
Thanks, Josh. I'm Abbas Mahmood. I'm head of data and digitalization at the Energy Networks Association. My role is to work with the networks, government, regulators, and sort of industry stakeholders to help progress the UK's data and digitalization agenda.
Great. And last but not least, Michael.
Yeah, I'm Michael Glass, the data governance manager at SSEN Distribution. We operate in parts of the north of Scotland and then a small section, but not small in population in the south of England as well. Me and my team sit at that intersection of data governance, data quality, and looking at that regulatory planning work that we're doing for ED3. Essentially means I spend a lot of time on the unglamorous but essential question of how we make data trustworthy enough that people outside of our organization will actually use it as well.
I think you might find that the audience here today finds that quite glamorous, Michael. So thank you for your intro. Great. Let's kick things off. So big question to start for everyone. What are the key challenges and opportunities in the sector where we see improving data sharing as having the biggest impact? So Yusing, can I come to you to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I'll take Optimistic's point of view. We've been sharing data for the past 5 years now, and we've got dozens of use cases. You won't be surprised, and it touches from everything in academia to local government, where we share our data with the Greater London Authority, and that helps them plan around London, coordinating street works. So if you've ever driven down a road and there's temporary street works from gas, water, and electricity on different weeks throughout a year, we try and coordinate those together. So you only are disrupted once. There are safety use cases as well. You'll be surprised how many farmers, people working in farmland are in danger or get electrocuted from, which you're working, you're looking down at your feet, you're not looking up, and equipment touches our equipment, and there are safety incidents. Farmers are using our data to inform their work teams as they go out into the field. And of course, connections to the network. Open data, I think the biggest benefit has been speeding things up for the economy. When you're talking about multi-million pound renewable generation projects, data centers, housing developments going up, open data and the electricity networks has really sped that up. But there are challenges, and I'm sure we'll touch on those in a bit, because there is a consultation out by Ofgem at the moment where they're looking to change things up.
Great, thanks, Yusing. And love to hear those open data use cases. We love open data, but one of the hard things about it is that it's you never know who's using your data and for what unless they tell you. So gathering those use cases is always so important. Michael, can I come to you next for that question?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on you, Shing, there, around that whole connections piece. The UK network's vastly different. We're a small island, but vastly different in different areas of the country, whether that's geography or even population and use as well. And I feel like one of the big opportunities with open data and data sharing is that network planning under uncertainty. It's an ever changing network that we're now in. We're trying to connect many new types of technology, whether it's EVs, heat pumps, solar, and new generation as well, to a grid that historically has been designed for that one-way power flow. And the data that is required to make decisions around where to install this new technology exists, but it is fragmented across many different DNOs, suppliers, aggregators, and local authorities, and everybody in between. So, there's a real opportunity there in terms of bringing all this data together and being able to provide this new perspective and this new view of where best to install this new technology, but also how we respond to that new change and new shift in demand when it comes to energy.
That's great, Michael. Thank you. Rachel, can I move over to you next?
Yeah, sure thing. Maybe I can reel off some challenges, and I will come back to opportunities because I do want to kind of share some positivity as well. I think on the challenges front, I think the theme of risk management maybe can be a bit of a challenge, from regulatory frameworks that can struggle to keep pace, emergent risks around new autonomous systems that we aren't sure how they'll manifest in the markets and with each other. Operational risks and how we manage that around how data will be used and how it affects the safety of our networks. And then I guess the closest to my heart is probably the consumer risks. So how we manage that, how we manage how their data is used and how data is used to make decisions for the consumer, for the customers, for people. I think about my dad in this context a lot. To paint a picture of my dad. So my dad's 80. He is partially sighted. He is lucky enough to have solar panels and a battery at home that he is absolutely obsessed with, like obsessed with. He likes technology, but he is not digitally literate. I get like 10 phone calls a week around doing certain things for him. And like on one hand, data sharing could be awesome for him. It can mean better tariffs. It could give him access to third-party applications that make his life easier as a vulnerable person, and also easier to manage his mini microgrid. But on the other hand, it could be used for bad, right? In the wrong hands without proper risk management in place. So that consumer risk management piece is really important and can be a challenge. We've spoken to a lot of stakeholders across the UK, across the globe, from startups to energy networks, chatting to loads of data folks. And I think one of the key themes is the challenge of building trust in the data. So on one hand, as a data consumer, can I trust that data? And as a data owner or a data provider, can I trust what you're going to do with it if I give it to you? And I guess ultimately, if people don't trust that data, then they won't trust the insights and the use of that data, and ultimately the whole thing's a waste of time. So building trust is really important. Anyway, I think if you flip all those challenges on their head, if you can create a secure environment for sharing really well understood, kind of trusted data, then innovation can absolutely flourish. Kaggle competitions where you can have loads of really skilled, enthusiastic people trying to solve a problem. Academia kind of really pushing the boundaries, companies, startups coming up with new services, training of AI foundational models, like the list is endless. And we've got some really meaty challenges that need some innovation. Dave shared some information there from our UK Energy Transition Outlook. I was looking at our global one in preparation for this webinar, and there's some really kind of stuff that sticks. At the moment, it looks like we're going to be really slow to meet the Paris Agreement. We'll be feeling the effects of a 2.2 degree rise by 2100. I'm not sure how we're saying that year yet. I'm sure that'll come in time. And, a cost of living crisis, right? With energy costs playing a real part of that. So, yeah, if we solve all those challenges, the innovation opportunity is massive.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rachel. And yes, no, it's good for you to foreground some challenges so we don't get too excited and realize that we are, coming up against some major things in the world. But with the rise of AI is obviously putting new demands on the energy sector that we're kind of unused to. So, but also thank you for the story about your dad. That was a great way to kind of turn it around. I'm going to come to John to end us off for the first question, and maybe you can speak to some opportunities as well.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I don't think I've got anything necessarily to add that hasn't been mentioned. I think all the main points have been covered, but perhaps from like a different perspective, as a data user, the ability for third parties like us to build software solutions and services on top of that open data is so important. Like, it's a massive opportunity. We don't shy away from the fact that Yotta would not exist if there wasn't open energy data. I think there's a lot of countries in Europe and most of America where Yotta just wouldn't be able to exist. There isn't competitors to us because there isn't the data to actually build those products. And then that just allows decision making and analysis to be done upfront by people looking to build data centers, EV charging hubs, housing developments, and so on. And hopefully that should accelerate the speed at which things can happen, makes the process much more efficient for everyone. Not everything has to go through the DNO. The DNO doesn't have to think about serving every single part of the audience and the market, and so on. But as everyone's mentioned, there are those challenges. Like, there's been a ton of data that's been published and made available, but sometimes if that doesn't come with the context, if it's not to a high enough quality and standard, sometimes it can be hard to know what to do with that data. And ultimately, you've got to go back and speak to the DNO anyway. So I think there's a bit of a bridge there that we need to really make sure that all of that context is coming with the data, that it's consistent and standardized enough. We obviously have the challenge across all the DNOs. Sometimes it can feel like speaking a different language when you cross a DNO border, but that'll come with time. I think at the minute we're at that stage where there's a lot of opportunity, there's still a lot of problems to solve, but we're definitely far away ahead from other parts of the world.
Thanks, John. And great to hear that open data is powering new businesses like yours. That's really great feedback to hear on the movement as a whole. Moving on to our second question here. So now I want to talk a little bit more about hurdles. We talked about some challenges, lots of opportunities, but what are the main hurdles when it comes to improving how we collect, use, and share data in the energy sector? Now, for this one, I want to start off with Michael. Maybe you can lend some of your expertise.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and it probably does pick up on one of the challenges from previous is around building that trust in data, and it's around that fact that a lot of this data that we have was collected for operational purposes, whether it was billing, fault management, looking at regulatory compliance, but it wasn't initially collected for that strategic sharing. We're in a transformation period as an industry, looking at how we make this data much more accessible, and that requires a lot of data governance, a lot of metadata management, and understanding and communicating that data in a way that makes sense outside of its operational purpose. And that historically has been quite slow work, and we're looking at all these opportunities for how we speed that up. And one of the things is where we look at what Ofgem's done with some of the data best practice principles, those guiding principles that the DNOs and transmission operators can come around and start to discuss and understand how we apply those in a consistent way across all of us. And with that, you've got this semantic fragmentation as well. So where we might call certain aspects of data one thing and describe it in a different way, UKPN or NGED or another DNO may describe it in a completely different way. And we have those same concepts of data across our systems, but very different definitions as well. So even when it is that technically accessible, we're all publishing data, interoperability of that data takes a massive amount of effort. And the data portals that we all have solves the publication problem of putting that data out there, but it doesn't necessarily solve that standards problem. And until we as an industry can agree on all those schemas and aggregate that data, it is a slow process, but we're working on it. I know myself and Yuxing are working very closely month to month with the BAS and the ENA to come together and build these schemas and build these standards. But that transition isn't being held by a lack of ambition. It's just being held by back by that lack of interoperability.
Thanks, Michael. And yeah, it's no mean feat, and the energy sector certainly isn't alone. The ODI works across almost every sector, I'd say, and companies that were set up to do something like provide energy or provide water or allow for financial transactions. Data's the lifeblood, but it's not the first thing that was created, and not the kind of prime service. So always hard to stitch that together. And I mean, speaking of that, the work that you've been doing with Using, maybe you'd like to come in on that as well.
Yeah. Michael, do you call substations transformer chambers as well in Scotland?
No, I don't think so.
There you go, semantic fragmentation right there. Just last week, I was speaking to someone who's operational in the field, and so many different terms came up which I've never heard of before. Rigger boots. Anyone know what those are? No. Boots you can wear to climb. Yeah, they are kind of boots for climbing. And then another one was climbing irons. Anyone? No. So they're almost like spurs that you put on your boots that they can dig into poles as you climb up. So we DNOs have different semantics, vocabulary, as you can see. And I always hope that a clever company like Yotta would come about and vacuum up all this data.
Trying.
I
think I spent about 2 months the other day trying to figure out who defines what as a BSP. Yeah.
Good luck. So I think, standardization is a major hurdle, and there's a lot of value to be unlocked if you can be the one that unmuddles it all. Another hurdle is, I think, Michael, you mentioned earlier about a feedback loop. Publish hundreds of data sets, tell us which ones you're using, how you're using it, tell us what works, what doesn't work. And I think Yotta's been quite good at that recently in our engagements. And on data quality, I don't think that's as big as an issue as people think. And don't shoot me here. Let me explain. I think open data, the data quality is good enough for what it serves as a purpose, which is always meant to be that preliminary sense check, temperature check of the data before if you say connection application, you just use it to figure out where the bad zones are or the red zones are, and just go target the green zones, and then that will inform your conversation with UK Power Networks or Scottish and Southern. So yeah, that's my bit, Josh. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. And always great to learn sort of new terms, especially of sartorial types in the energy sector. I have family back in Canada that they work on power lines, so they must know all about this stuff. I'll have to ask what it's called on that side of the pond as well. But yeah, just wanted to round off the kind of question over to you, John, as a data user. What are you seeing in terms of those hurdles?
Yeah, I think one specific thing that has been quite interesting for us lately is this kind of balance of the potential upside of publishing data and making it open versus the potential risks. I think particularly there's been lots of talk lately around like kind of energy security and national security in terms of publishing where every single cable and every single substation and the load going through it is, which it's hard. Yeah, kind of it's a tough decision to make. There's a lot of tension there, and I think the bit that is probably missing at the minute, which I think makes it really difficult for the DNOs, is that clear guidance on what they can and what they can't publish. There was a couple of years ago, lots of kind of network infrastructure in terms of the cables used to be published. Then there was some like email that went around from DESNOs that scared a few DNOs, understandably, and haven't had much guidance in. So that's often the conversation we're having. We don't know whether it's that the data doesn't exist for the reasons like Michael said, like a lot of these data sets weren't collected for sharing with the public openly. They were for internal processes, or whether there's concern around security. So yeah, I think that'll get worked out over time. It often takes one DNO to publish it, and then a few others will follow suit. But I don't feel like there's much backing given to the DNOs. It's all put on them. Understandably, they're risk averse, right? And ultimately, I think the big challenge with energy data is we're dealing with physical assets in the ground that are literally keeping the lights on for the whole country. So it's hard to get away from that. I don't really want risk on DNOs. That's probably not probably not something we really want. But at the same time, yeah, there's so much progress that could be made from having this data publicly available. But yeah, it's a tough balance.
Absolutely, and I commend the DNOs and with leadership from ENA on the kind of work they've done on things like the data triage playbook that have really been thinking quite critically about those risks and not just about identifying risks, but how do we mitigate them, how do we overcome them so we can get the most out of this data. Moving on, I'd like to think about the wider ecosystem a little bit. So we have a number of different organizations here, but what roles do you all see for, kind of industry, government, civil society, and academia having to play in helping the energy sector get to this next level of data sharing that we need to achieve? So, we know it's not just on any one of those groups. So what does that sort of, interplay look like? And maybe I know you've been doing a lot of work in this space for a while now and referenced a bit yourself. So maybe we can start with you.
Yes. So one of the challenges, or I guess timeout, I guess it's a timeout time by Ofgem. They've got a live consultation out at the moment called Securing Open Data in Energy. I was going to copy and paste it into the chat. Thank you, ODI. Where they're calling on network operators such as Michael and ourselves, data users such as John, to respond to their consultation. What Ofgem's looking to do after 3-4 years of open data is to revisit energy network data that is open. And for context, we have several conflicts around the world where energy infrastructure is being targeted. In Ukraine, the Middle East, you've seen gas terminals being struck, pipelines, etc. And so you've got regional conflicts where energy infrastructure is targeted, and that has impacts on civilian populations. Second part is the rapid advancement in artificial intelligence / large language models. And what Ofgem is saying is that they're a bit concerned about what you can do with open data sets. And when you aggregate them, does it roll back some of the mitigations that companies like mine and Michael's have put in place to make it relatively risk-free? Tricky question. We've done an assessment in-house and we don't think we've materially increased the risk profile. For instance, it's pretty obvious where substations are through local knowledge. If you're an energy geek, you probably know where your local primary and secondaries are. But it's pretty obvious to the layman where it is from Google Maps. There's road signage. You walk down a street and you'll see, here's a National Grid 400 kV substation. You can hear it and you can see the danger of death signs. And I recognize that, there's risk, but there's also benefits. So what I really want to see is a sort of balanced approach where we're not going to stunt economic growth in this country, but we will have a digitalized energy system in this age of AI, but also national security. So there's a balance to be struck. We'll be responding to the consultation. I'm going to propose a fourth option. But if you're a user of open data from DNOs, do respond to this consultation. That's it from me.
Thanks, Yuxing. And Michael, do you want to comment on that topic as well?
Yeah, Yuxing covered quite a lot there, but like with those roles of government, they've done what's happened in the past number of years with data best practice and some of the regulations come in, has done more to accelerate data governance maturity in DNOs and TOs over the past decade than we would ever potentially done in voluntary effort. And that's not for lack of trying, it's just that regulation has allowed us to create that compliance culture and allow us to look at, okay, well, we need to be in this position to deliver that economy benefit, to deliver the additional benefits that come with data sharing. However, it's not an ecosystem. It's just getting every individual network operator into that position. Where that ecosystem comes is very much from Yuxing's call there, is that we need to understand who's using that data, what do they want to use it for. Civil society and academia are perfect for this, and I would say they probably are more underutilized in telling us how that data is being utilized. We have local authorities that are maybe modelling heat pump uptake and understanding where they can benefit from putting in more heat pumps, research around fuel poverty, or how community energy groups want to engage with that energy system. And we have, as individuals, we've all tried in our own ways to look at how we identify beneficial users before publishing data, because there is that, the risk on one hand, but that benefit and value opportunity on the other hand to so many different factors. But we end up in potentially over consultation and under publication where we've not been able to find the right people to come forwards. However, where we've tried to tackle that is publishing data openly and let users self-identify. What we need is that stronger feedback loop. More people telling us, this is what I'm using, this is where I'm running into problems. And as you Xing mentioned before, Yotta have been great at that. They've been knocking on our door for years, going, we found this with the data and this could be improved, and it's creating this roadblock on this use case. And we welcome that feedback because it allows us to improve the data that we're publishing, but also creates those additional benefits as well. One of the other things as well, from stopping over consultation, but looking at that download behavior of data and identifying who's using what data and what data is being downloaded the most. That's given us probably more information than we could ever get from any sort of prior consultation exercise that we may do. Even though we still run those, the data and the evidence is there from who's utilizing our data portals.
Great, and that's a really good point. Even sort of negative feedback is still useful feedback. So people should really shout to their data providers.
Oh, we get the negative feedback all the time, Josh. I assure you.
Yes, I meant about data specifically. But before moving into the kind of Q&A from the audience, as I see there's a number of questions coming in, I just wanted to ask one last question, and I'm going to direct this one at you, Abbas. Can you tell us sort of what you're working on right now that you think will help push us forward around this sort of next generation data sharing, or what do you want to be working on and with whom?
No, thank you. And I think before I can answer directly, a little bit of ENA context would be useful. So as I mentioned in my introduction, the ENA represents the UK's networks. So we've got Yuxing on the call, we've got Michael, and through our Data and Digitalization Steering Group, or the DDSG, we bring together the networks, we bring together government, we bring together the regulators, and we help turn those policy and strategy into practical delivery. So at the moment, I personally view us already having a tremendous amount of data, but the main challenge is around creating standards, the governance, and sort of collaboration needed to allow the data to flow effectively between organizations. And I think that's where ENA adds its biggest value. So, and then there's three particular areas on that at the moment that we're supporting to help push the sector forward. So firstly, we've got common standards and interoperability. So one of the biggest barriers to effective data sharing is inconsistency. So organizations collect similar data, but they structure it differently, they define it, exchange it differently. I know Yuxing mentioned earlier on symbology and semantics. And through the DDSG, we're supporting work on common standards and interoperability. So particularly through the Common Information Model, or CIM. So, for example, we're standardizing LTDS submissions, annual submissions to Ofgem. We're making modifications to grid codes. So if we want data to move seamlessly between organizations and sectors, we need to have that common language. So that's my first point. And I think secondly is modernizing in terms of how to modernize network data and network data sharing. So alongside standards, so again, the DDSG, we're focused on governance and frameworks that enable trusted data sharing. So we've delivered initiatives alongside yourself, ODI. On the open data license, we delivered the shared data license, and we've also developed, as you mentioned in the chat, the triage methodologies to help support the networks. And then thirdly, I think this is probably the biggest one, is coordination and collaboration. So again, the sector, it doesn't lack innovation. We've got Connect Direct being a big highlight recently. So there's already lots of good projects and initiatives underway, but I think the challenge is connecting those activities, sharing lessons learned, and scaling successful approaches. So again, one of the DDSG's key roles is bringing together the networks, bringing together government, regulators, NESO, industry stakeholders such as yourself, and coordinate activity and accelerate progress across the sector. So just to finish off with a quick look ahead in terms of what I'd personally like to see, I think is greater collaboration across industry, government, the regulators, academia such as ODI and DNV. And Success for me is creating that environment where trusted data sharing becomes BAU and is supported by common standards, effective governance, and sort of strong collaboration.
Thanks so much, Abbas. And yeah, I think it really showcases the value of having these organizations sort of at the center of the market that can independently and trustedly, bring together different organizations and help work on those standards or standardized approaches and processes. I think it makes a huge difference for data users like John to have that service. I'm going to jump to the audience Q&A now. So we'll do this for a bit, and if we run out of time, we can kind of go back to, or run out of questions rather, we can go back to our main questions. But I want to make sure that the audience gets their voice in here today. So we'll start off with John. John asks, are there any examples of good data sharing in the energy sector where there has needed to be some degree of desensitizing data due to IP or commercial restrictions, for example? And how is that challenge approached with the data owner or creator? Can anyone speak to that?
Me.
You sing by all means.
We published a suite of data center related data sets, given the focus on AI in order to talk about the Mag 7, etc. And there's one data set where we showed the half-hourly utilization of every data center that's connected to our network that we are aware of. And that was tricky because it's commercially sensitive. If I'm telling you that John Thompson from Yotta's data center is only 10% utilized throughout the year, but he's telling people that it's a really popular data center. It's got Meta, Google, etc. as customers, and it's heavily utilized, then people might disagree with his valuation of his data center. So how have we desensitized this? We've used utilization percentages. So from 0 to 100, we've not told people where it is, and we've anonymized the data center. We've just given them numbers. It's featured in a few internet articles where people are writing about data centers in the UK, and it's part of that conversation and debate. But as far as I know, no one's been identified. But we risk assess that with our legal team, put it through tests to make sure that people can't backtrack what we've done.
I'll just add to that. I was going to add to that. Yeah, it was a really useful data set because I'm not just saying that because that it was insight into behind the meter consumption, which is often, kind of famously very, very hard to get hold of. You kind of see the registered capacity of a project, but you never understand, like when you're managing grid capacity, you want to know what's happening behind the meter. So that was a really good way of getting, I don't really care where the data centers are. From our perspective, it's just really interesting to see like what actually happens behind the meter. And it was, a really good data set to be able to do that.
Nice. Thank you.
Great. Doing the matchmaking live on the webinar. This is fantastic. No, that's really interesting. I mean, the data center question is obviously such a hot potato these days. So being able to get that data out, to desensitize it, I think it's really useful. Even I think in the EU, they've backtracked recently on policies around kind of granularity on energy use by data centers. So I think if the UK can lead on that, that's a huge feather in our cap. Does anyone want to come in on that, or else I can go on to another one of these really good questions we have here. Cool. So Sophie Peachy has asked a couple questions. So I'm going to go to your second one, Sophie, because I think it's really interesting. So this is on kind of commerciality and value. The question is, who should take responsibility for the commercial model for the infrastructure behind cooperative data sharing, given that the benefits of sharing aren't always as great for the sharer as they are for the user? So with that sort of value distribution in mind, the cost got to come somewhere. Who should step up and be kind of responsible for that commercial model? Anyone have any thoughts? I think it's a really interesting question.
So we obviously have the data sharing infrastructure that's coming in from NESO, and we are all developing our own modules that integrate with that data sharing infrastructure. So SSEN Distribution has one, UKPN are also working on that and getting involved. And the aspect of this, there's a bit of decentralization. So we're all taking on our own costs and fundings to engage with this and create that platform. But there is still that central element that right now, Ofgem has obviously decided that to be NESO, but that's then going to be reviewed as we get further down the programme. I think, however, come to the second half of that, around the benefits of sharing aren't as always great for the sharer as for the user. And I think there's an attitude that potentially needs to change within energy industry and look at how open banking has maybe done that. It should be a two-way street, and increasing that again, harping on this topic, but that increasing that feedback loop will allow us to get more benefit from the data that we publish, because we might not get all the insights from the data that we hold. Somebody else might come and provide that insight back to us, whether it's quality of supply on their network down to somebody having more granularity of data, or even having assets that consume energy from the network, that they're then able to go, well, in this area, quality of supply is not as great as it is in this area. And that might be something that we may have been blind to just with the information that we had. And it's that change of network operator from just being a data publisher and increasing that appetite to become also a data consumer as well, and start to kind of have a bit more of that collaborative working. So second half of that answer question is probably much easier to answer. It's a change of culture for us. The first half around a commercial model for infrastructure, we're all getting involved to date, but I think there's a longer tail on that.
I love that
Great
piece
stuff.
about the benefits, Michael. I think you're right. Like if we think about the energy system as a whole, the benefits can permeate through. Like with better access to data, consumers can get better personalized deals. They can manage their consumption better, in line with signals from around carbon and so forth. Retailers can give more competitive offerings. Uh, Asset owners and operators can manage their assets better. Then generators can invest in the right opportunities and reduce the whole kind of cost of operating the system. Affordability improves, and then it kind of you get the full circle almost. I guess that's an important thing to bear in mind.
And flexibility services is just kind of the initial part of that. We're focusing more on how we utilize the good capacity that we do have, rather than spending a lot of money on reinforcing the infrastructure and building more infrastructure. There's still space there to wiggle and sweat the assets that we have.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. So, at the ODI, who owns or who stewards data infrastructure is a big question, and there's no silver bullet answer. Sometimes it's the public sector makes sense to do it. Sometimes an independent not-for-profit, like in open banking, as was mentioned. Sometimes it should be industry owned. And we consider these organizations to be, kind of data institutions, those that steward this data. And it's I think it's a huge space, a growing space, and always a lot of interesting questions around that. I'm going to move on to another question around EVs now, because we haven't heard about that yet. So, with EVs now moving from human drivers to autonomous, do you expect to see increased public data sharing from the energy sector and fleets? Or is there a risk that energy demand, vehicle movement, or safety data becomes less visible and more proprietary for commercial reasons? What should we be doing to ensure and protect access to these data sets to enable innovation? Anyone want to ride the EV question? I see Rachel, you seem excited.
Yeah, such a good question. I don't think I'm going to answer it fully, but I'm going to take a little tangent to it. It's such a good point around the autonomous EVs. I think, we forecast that, EVs are becoming bigger and bigger on having a bigger and bigger impact on the grid. Vehicle to grid will probably be a thing. I think we're estimating that it will provide almost 50% of the total throughput is batteries, which is massive. So I guess going back to the benefit cycle, I feel like maybe not public kind of open data sharing, but definitely like data sharing contracts between parties will be necessary because there's going to be mutual benefit, for people supplying the energy and also for the EV owners to get better rates, and where there's mutual benefit, then those arrangements will happen. So yeah, unsure on the open data part of it, but definitely kind of data contracts, data sharing between parties, I would expect and hope that's true.
Yeah, I agree with Rachel on that. They are commercial businesses at the end of the day, like Waymo and robotaxis and anything else that comes up. They are going to have that operational edge, which is all the data that they have, whether it's route data, the demand energy data, and how they charge these vehicles and what percentage, and then also just the behavior of the vehicle in itself. That is all their commercial proprietary operational data that allows them to perform. However, without that data from a DNO side of things, it's, like you said, Rachel, 50% vehicle to grid is going to have a massive impact on how demand, but also capacity of the grid. And DNOs need to have some way of seeing that so that we can plan around it, and local authorities as well. And one of the big things I think here is looking at that data governance and that trust framework that goes around that data sharing. If that can be established first before it gets to scale, that it's just unbearable. It's much harder to retrofit some of these data sharing obligations, as we are seeing in this energy industry that's been here for over 100 years. But it's much harder to get these things into the industry than build them into it from the start. And this autonomous vehicle is very much at its infancy just now.
Thanks so much, Michael. I think we might have time for one more of the audience Q&A questions, if it's a relatively short answer. So Alistair Gray asks, how widely adopted are the fair data principles within the energy sector? So fair data principles being findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. I'm sure Yixing and Michael have an idea of how it's done, where they work. John, do you have a sort of sector-wide view on how findable, accessible, interoperable data sets are? Wondering if get the users' view on that.
Yeah, I'm not particularly familiar with the framework, but from your description, yeah, I think findable and usable. I think the open data portals have been really big for that. Like I said, like even just the fact that most of them use like one or the other open data portal, so it's very easy to use and find data sets. I think the interoperable bit is always going to be the challenge. We've got multiple DNOs that work in different ways, have different definitions, and have worked that way for decades and decades and decades. So that will take time. There's definitely progress. I don't think it's far off. Yeah, there's just still some things. I think these things aren't just written down, right? Like some things just aren't agreed upon. It was a very people-driven business for decades, and then now all of a sudden it transform to a digital business overnight. That's going to take some time.
Absolutely. So yeah, we've shared the FAIR principles for those that aren't aware of it. It comes from the world of sort of scientific research. It's being more widely adopted within different data ecosystems and sectors as a kind of gold standard. So we think it's making progress, but it always takes a bit of work.
Josh, just to add, the data best practice principles that the network operators have to abide by do come from FAIR principles.
Mm-hmm.
And Ofgem has looked or have made it mandatory for the other energy companies to follow suit. I think the code bodies in particular. So it is fair in the energy sector. Have I lost Josh?
Yeah, I think Josh has dropped there.
Stunned silence.
Right at the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're pretty much wrapping up anyway, right?
Well, that was a very weird time to lose connection. So
it wasn't a power cut, was it, Josh, in London?
I'll get a text from UKPN pretty soon if it was. So
can't be us.
I'll let you know.
Be someone else.
Yeah, hopefully it's just the telecoms industry on this one today. but yeah, unfortunately, and fortunately, I came back just in time. We'll have to kind of come to the end of today's event, but it has been recorded. We will be sharing it shortly. So make sure you do sign up to our events newsletter to receive this and all the other great stuff that comes along with it. So a big thank you to our panelists for making this such an informative session. And thank you to everyone who came today, especially those who asked questions. So yeah. Goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much for being here.